All right. I figured after the zoo last night, you guys were all worn out. Is that it? Okay. I want to welcome you to the NASS Cybersecurity Committee meeting. I'm Paul Pate, Iowa's Secretary of State, and NASS's immediate past president. Control the front row, Jay. That's right. Paul and Mary will be here soon. Again, I want to say it's an honor to be here and to chair this committee along with New Mexico's Secretary of State and current NASS President Maggie Tollhouse Oliver. First, I want to welcome you to Iowa, and I hope you're having a good time for this NASS Summer Conference. We're very proud to be hosting this for our first for many of you at least, in person. Because we don't have any committee business on the agenda today, we're going to move right into the program. We're going to suspend the attendance roll call per se. We'll let Lindsay just make notes and do it that way if it's all right with everybody. And we'll just roll right into the panel discussion. I'm pleased to, as I said, to moderate our state shared practices discussion. And as secretaries, we often refer to cybersecurity, and I'm stealing Steve Simon's line here, as a race without a finish line. Sharing ideas across the states for how to continue making cybersecurity improvements in a limited resource and involving threat environment is one of the most important things this committee can do. So today we have 2 states with us who are going to present 5 of the cybersecurity practices that they've implemented that have made the biggest impact. And my office's Chief Information Officer Kyle Phillips will be presenting on behalf of Iowa, and Secretary Simon will present from Minnesota, along with his office's Election Security Cyber Navigator, Bill Ekblad. Secretary Simon, I'm going to let you begin it and kick us off.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm Steve Simon, Secretary of State for Minnesota. Why don't we just launch right in here? And by way of introduction, let me say that, yeah, this is a race without a finish line. I and many others have said it as well. And let me just start by noting something that's a mixed blessing, mostly a blessing, but also mixed, which is that we now know, with a little bit of hindsight looking back on 2020, that 2020 was, fortunately, and for all the right reasons, no 2016. We did not apparently face the same kind of impact or success, you might say, from outsiders trying to get in. And we should all be proud of that. That was a team effort. This is a team sport in our own states, and it's a team sport nationally as well. So we're thankful to CISA and the Department of Homeland Security, and we should all be grateful for the efforts undertaken in our own states to apparently have made 2020 a very secure election from the standpoint of infrastructure and outsiders trying to get in. But that should not, it needs to be said, that should not be a license for any of us to sit back, congratulate ourselves, and not strive every day to make our systems even stronger than they are right now. I think we all realize that, but I think it needs to be said in light of the apparent success of 2020. So I am going to just take a few minutes, Bill Ekblad and I, to talk about what we're doing in Minnesota. And it may be very well things that many of you are doing as well. We don't claim to have cornered the market on best practices, but we wanted to share with you because we've been asked to share some of what we think has worked for us. So these are the major 5 that I'm going to cover in the slides ahead. We'll start with the first one. The first thing is to coordinate with state partners. And we've done that, and we really urge everyone to do that, and perhaps and hopefully you already are doing that. So here are some of the state partners that we work with, and you can read those for yourselves. We have something called a fusion center. I think most states have something like this, whether it goes by that name or not, which is what it sounds like. It's a fusion of various institutions and organizations which come together often in one physical space. In Minnesota, this fusion center is in St. Paul. It's where we and I receive our intelligence briefing, where there's a SCIF, where we can have the calls that so many of you have been on. And the services that these various organizations provide in our state, and no doubt in most, if not every state, are things like situational awareness, statewide trend analysis, logistical support, personnel, actual people. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, that's been something that's been so important to me and to us in our office, is people whose job it is to do this stuff. And linking up with them, hearing what they have to say, even when or if you disagree, has something that's been of tremendous value to me and to our office. And then just understanding existing infrastructure. 2016, I think it's important to realize, at least for us, I think for most people in this room, was a watershed moment. 2016, after that election, was the wake-up call for all of us. And over the last few years, for us, just even within the state of Minnesota, being able to link up with these other in-state organizations to understand more fully what the infrastructure is. What are the tools out there? What are the points of vulnerability, not just in our office, but the ways in which our office connects with other offices? So that's within the state. Number two is utilizing federal resources. And of course, we do a lot of talking at these NASS conferences about what those resources are. You can see what they are, and many of you are familiar with them on this slide. But I wanted to just talk a little bit about why what you're seeing in these bullet points adds value, at least from the Minnesota standpoint. And it adds value in terms of identifying existing vulnerabilities, validating, hopefully, our security posture and direction in our office, talking to these folks and getting an outside set of ears and eyes as to what is adequate, what is less than adequate, if anything, what are the challenges and how we can do better. Timely alerts and information, I think we've all benefited from that. Staff training. And our staff has been glad to get that training from outside federal sources to get their vantage point. And also, let's not forget, cost savings. And this is something that I think isn't talked about enough. It's not the only reason we do it. It's not the primary reason we do it. But if you want a secure system, you can take advantage of the federal resources or you can do this privately. And in the 2016 election, before CISA was set up the way it is now, we did that. And it costs tens of thousands of dollars every time you want to get that kind of assistance. So there are all sorts of great reasons to reach out and establish these federal partnerships, but one of them is you save money. Next, just wanted to talk about vulnerability disclosure programs, or VDPs, formerly known as white hat hacking, right? And I just have to say, I first became Secretary of State in 2015, went to my first NASS conference in January or February in Washington, and the sea change just in this body, in NASS, since then has been remarkable. Back in 2015, 2016, 2017, I think it's safe to say, and I include myself in this group, that we as secretaries, and I don't want to speak for anyone else, but my sense of the room was we were really wary of these white hat hackers, particularly certain organizations which, I will say, tended to showcase in a very showy way. I'm talking about DEF CON and these other groups, I'll just name them, would have their conference in Las Vegas, and they would, in a loud way, showcase these vulnerabilities. And we as secretaries, I think, I'm speaking, generally speaking, we're very wary. There's been a real sea change in attitudes, which is, we still might not like some of the entities and how they talk about it, but this idea of enlisting outside, whatever you want to call them, white hat hackers or others, to help us identify vulnerabilities, I think there's a receptivity now that there wasn't even 2 or 3 years ago. And I think I'm personally an example of that. I too was very wary and very suspicious of the gotcha quality of some of this. And some of that still rankles, of course, but the idea of reaching out to folks in many instances who know what they're talking about and enlisting their help in identifying vulnerabilities. So Colorado, I think it's worth saying, has led the way here for many years, but there's real value here. We're in the process right now of trying to create a VDP prior to the 2022 election. We're discovering, as Colorado and other states have warned us, that this is hard work. It takes a lot of staff time developing the scope, the rules, finding the right partner, the so-called white hat hacker or firm who can help us identify these vulnerabilities, but we're excited about the possibilities. Lastly, I just want to talk about the basics. And I've learned a lot, certainly in the last few years, as we all have. And this is sort of like brushing your teeth, right? The things that you do, you don't even think you do them, you don't even remember doing them, you just do them as a matter of just personal maintenance. I've highlighted 2 examples here, multi-factor authentication, which I think all of us are doing a lot of. You have to work with your counties, your cities, it's a team sport. You have to determine which mode or method works best for you. And then there's network segmentation, a term that I will be candid with you, I didn't even know what that was a few years ago. But it's something that we do now. It's making sure that a breach of one part of the network isn't a breach of all the networks or all the part of the networks. It takes a lot of time and planning. It requires ongoing maintenance and refinement of the segmentation itself. And so that's something that we've been doing. Again, it's like brushing your teeth, or it should be after a time, for your IT folks to just do this stuff year in and year out. With that, let me hand it over to, I'm really the opening act for Bill Ekblad. I am the scrappy local band opening for the Rolling Stones. Bill Ekblad is a wonder. He is, we hired him in late 2019. He's a career naval officer from Minnesota who came back home after a distinguished career in the Navy, also had stints with U.S. intelligence in the cyber area. We're thrilled to have him as our cyber navigator, and he's our secret weapon, and I will have him tell you a little bit more about what he has done and what he aims to do.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for that way too kind introduction. I appreciate it. Rolling Stones is not something I've ever been compared to before, but I'll take it. Thank you. Let's see. So, like many of your states, Minnesota's elections are run by our counties. We've got 87 of them, and they are a very diverse collection of counties in terms of size and scope and technical abilities as well. So, highlight on the slide there, you see one of our smallest and our largest. As I mentioned, a full gamut of savviness in terms of how to defend networks, how to protect their systems, different sizes of staffs to do those functions. And so when we started to look at how to establish a program to assist them in preparing for cyber threat activity, we had to take into account that large, diverse collection of their skills and abilities. So you'll hear that sort of as an undertone to the entire content of what I'm about to present. So just a quick shot of what I intend to tell you about here. We'll talk about how we got started, what it took to get the effort off the ground, how last year fared, and then maybe most critically, some of the lessons we learned through the first year or so of our program. So as was referenced by Secretary Simon, and certainly no new idea to all of you, 2016 was, of course, that watershed moment, that light bulb on moment when people realized that elections and related systems were indeed cyber targets for foreign adversaries. Through forums like this one, our office gained that awareness that we probably had some gaps to tighten up there across our statewide architecture, and so the enlightenment of organizations like NASS and the partners through here helped kind of plant that seed that maybe there's something more that can and should be done in the way of coordination down through the local officials that actually conduct the elections. And so that was really the spark that started our Cyber Navigator program. The key enabler, the fuel, if you will, was the HAVA resources that Congress freed up through the last few years. I will say that Minnesota has had some challenges in terms of legislative requirements for that funding to be authorized for the Secretary's office to use for this purpose. And because of some delays in that regard, our program really wasn't able to get the head start we would have liked in preparation for the major election of 2020. It wasn't really until later in 2019 when the funding was freed up and made available. I was hired in to start this work in December of 2019, which again, staring straight down the barrel of a pretty major election year was a daunting task. So we really had to focus on how much we could get done in as short a time as possible. We decided to really focus, again with one person, on this concept of awareness, and really a two-prong approach to awareness. First of all, making sure our county and local officials were aware of the types of threats that they should be ready to deal with, the capabilities, the adversaries, the tools, the things that they needed to know could be coming at them in terms of their preparations for the 2020 election. But also, equally importantly, to make them aware of this vast sea of resources that are available to help them. There is no shortage of help from state, federal, academic, nonprofit partners out there. Everyone wants to do the right thing for election security for all the right reasons. The problem is there's almost too much help, which is a great problem. But if you are a local official in a town of 3,000 people and you're worried about collecting property taxes and the latest levy for the drainage ditch and all these other things, this is a hard thing to put on your priority list. So our concept for the Navigator was to help those local officials navigate that sea of assistance, identify where their gaps were, and get them the help they needed. So that was a key focus going in, and something that we thought we could make some ground on with one person's efforts, even in advance of a major election year like 2020. Okay, so a little bit about where we got started. The key here really was that no one in Minnesota had done this work before. So we certainly knew who the election officials are and were. We deal with them all the time from the Secretary of State's office. But a key thrust of our program was to also fold in the IT leaders across the county landscape to acknowledge their role in protecting the elections systems that they are responsible for in their counties. And that was sort of the novel thing that hadn't been taken on before. In a lot of cases, it was cold calls and knocks on doors and here's who I am and what I'm doing. For the most part, people were receptive to us bringing them into the fold in this work. They knew they had these responsibilities. In many cases, their own relationships with their election officials, auditors, treasurers, if you will. They were just one customer among many at that county level. And so bringing that state focus on that relationship and those priorities in terms of election security proved beneficial. And I think is maybe one of the more significant things that we took on and succeeded at throughout the course of our program since we started up. But also to build those relationships with the federal partners and the state partners who, are the expertise that are needed to bring those capabilities down to that local level. And so building out that network up, down, and sideways really was the key to it. And then once the individuals were all identified and folded in, then it was a matter of leveraging that network, of communicating with them regularly, both in mass. I do a lot of mass emails to them, but also individually, and sort of putting a personal touch on it and reaching out, getting to know the names and faces and making this the human endeavor that it really is. I think we think of cybersecurity as a highly technical thing. It, of course, is. But underneath it all, there's people doing bad things and there's people doing good things. And it's that people part that really lets you make a lot of ground and gain a lot of mileage without an incredible depth of technical understanding or a depth of resources. So, but ultimately, our focus was on sort of providing value. We didn't want to just be doing this for the sake of doing it. We wanted the counties to feel that our efforts were of use to them. And so that was another key takeaway and another theme that you'll hear about in the remainder of the slides I'll talk to. So as 2020 came around, again, we had spent the early part of 2020 building those relationships. As we entered our first major election event in March, which was our presidential nominating primary, and then again in August for the statewide primary, really was about using those relationships and leveraging the connections we had made, IT and elections officials, kind of treating that as the team that was going to defend Minnesota's state election architecture through those election events and then forward into the general election in November. One of the ways that we did that was to provide a collaboration mechanism to bring all those players together. We used Microsoft Teams and the chat room function that comes with its meeting rooms. And I'll confess, we did not have all 87 counties in there for every election event, but we had a significant number, and certainly by the November general election, we were topping 50 or 60 counties present in there. So we had an instant means to collaborate and coordinate on cybersecurity threats. That was the purpose of putting this together, but what we found is that collaboration mechanism was instantly useful for more than just cybersecurity threats. As noted by the asterisk there on this slide, we really didn't have this onslaught of cyber activity, but we had plenty of other things going on last year. So between COVID coordination factors, between physical security factors, the collaboration platform we built for our cybersecurity function was leveraged for all those other purposes and proved hugely valuable. And it's something that we'll continue to do moving forward in each of our major election events. So quickly to look at some of the lessons that we've learned through this endeavor. As is almost become cliche, cybersecurity is a team sport. It has to be looked at that way. I think the greatest gap that our adversaries can take advantage of is when someone with too little expertise or talent or skill or understanding feels like they have to go it alone. There's a very exploitable alley there for a bad guy to take advantage of, and we need to make sure that no one feels that that's the case. And so having that Rolodex available to our election officials, to our IT officials to know who to call, who to alert when something just doesn't smell, sound, or feel right has been a key part of this. And so knowing they have someone who has their back has been a central part. And again, to that same point, the personal relationship side. If all I was doing was mass mailing all these people, 300 plus contacts, we would not have had the success we did. It really is about letting them get to know me getting to know them, and establishing a healthy personal level relationship with as many of them as possible. And it's a tall order. It's a lot of email and phone time, but it's sort of the gumshoe work that makes a program like this successful. Focus on the low-hanging fruit. There is indeed a lot of it, and some of it is that coordination and awareness function, but also foot stomping some of the basic, simple technical things that most everyone understands. You gotta do your basic patching functions. You have to maintain password rotations and complexities. The things we all do every day in our online interactions, in managing our bank accounts and our cable TV accounts and all those things we do for ourselves and our kids, those apply to the workplace as well. And I think we have to make sure they're happening, they're not taking second priority, because those are the vulnerabilities and gaps that our adversaries are looking for. Help and resources are already there. As I said, there's a huge sea of help, but knowing who to go to get it is where the gap is. And so that's where our program is focused. Hasn't taken a ton of people to do that or a ton of technical understanding. It's just learning who's out there and who needs that help and bridging those gaps. Staying flexible. We started this look with the size and scope of a couple of our key counties. Not every county wants my in-depth help. Some are very capable of doing this themselves and have been for a long time. They'll still politely answer an email from me, but they're less interested in the details, as are some others. And so understanding who needs what, how much intervention they may want or assistance they may require is a key part of that personal element of making a program like this work. And then finally, to acknowledge that any progress is valuable. As one guy trying to carve through the 2020 election year, if I can help one county plug one gap, that's more than would have been the case if we hadn't done anything. So it's easy to get overwhelmed, but you have to kind of take those small victories, advance the ball as best able, and look at it from the big picture of how you're slowly making the system better. I think that was the extent of what I had, and happy to turn it back over.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Team Minnesota, for sharing with us today. We appreciate that. Now we're going to hear from Kyle Phelps from my office here in Iowa. Kyle, you want to dazzle me? Sorry. A little Iowa-Minnesota competition here.
Can you all hear me? Okay. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to talk to you. I get to talk about something that is my core philosophy for what cybersecurity is all about. I'm sure you've all been at a security operations center, a SOC, and you've seen all the fancy dashboards and the monitors, a wall full of monitors, and those are great, and those are important, and we need to have those. But the basics are what I consider to be the real security. I would go so far as to say that all the fancy stuff, the endpoint protections, the firewalls, that those are my insurance policy sort of protecting the real security. So what are the fundamentals? And this is by no means a comprehensive list. Lindsay told me I could talk about 5 things, so I'm going to pick out my top 5. So first one, back to the basics. Again, these are just the fundamentals. Physical security. Those who know me know I love to talk about physical security. Because I think it's one of the most overlooked parts of cybersecurity. All of us in our offices have ports in the wall for our computers to be plugged into, or in the floor. We might have a closet somewhere in our facility where it's full of networking equipment, which again is an entry point into our network. We have computers sitting on our desks that have USB ports, and all of these things are entry points into our systems that we need to be aware of. To protect from a physical security perspective. Why is it important? I could literally walk into a facility and plug in a little device like this and have remote access to that network in just a couple of minutes. As long as the network is unsecured, at least. The ports, even the USB port on our computer, someone could plug in a device into that thing called a keyboard sniffer and capture all the keyboard strokes, including passwords that are being entered into that computer. And so it's really critical that we be aware of these things and be thinking about these things. So what can we do? How many people went to the lock-picking thing yesterday? Is anybody wondering about your office door and how easy it might be to pick that lock? I certainly am. One of the things that you can do is take a look at the entry points to your facilities, and are they secure? I prefer electronic locking system over a key lock because it's logged, so you can know who goes in a door and when they go in through the door. You might consider putting cameras in highly valuable locations of your facility. I think one of the best things you can do is there's an individual there in your region who works for the Department of Homeland Security called a PSA, a Protective Security Advisor. You can have this individual come to your facility and do an assessment, a physical security assessment, and how it relates not only to your cybersecurity, but all of your physical security, even talking about an active shooter situation or any physical security issue. PSA from Department of Homeland Security, great resource. Number 2 on my list is cybersecurity awareness. I'm sure all of us in this room get an email once a year that says it's time to do your information security training, and I'm sure most of us kind of groan and think, we got to do this again. But at the same time, everybody in this room knows how important, how critical information security training is. But doing it once a year, is that really enough? We certainly don't think so. Our employees, our staffs, are the front lines of our defense against threat actors. And so what are some things that you can do in terms of cybersecurity awareness? Well, I think it's important to that awareness be kept in front of your staff's eyes all the time. One of the things we've been doing in our office recently, we do weekly cybersecurity tips. So this is just a really small, short email that goes out to our staff. We want it to be short so they'll actually read it. That's going to remind them, or perhaps even teach them, how to recognize a phishing email or what is social engineering. Any sorts of cybersecurity awareness that we can keep in front of them is great. If you don't have the resources to create these cyber tips yourself, there's all kinds of places that you can find on the internet to subscribe and get weekly or daily cybersecurity tips. Another thing you can do that I highly recommend for cyber awareness is phishing assessments. You can partner with a trusted organization to do a safe phishing email to just see how your employees do. Do they open the attachment? Do they click on the link? And they can do it you can do that in a safe way, in a way that's not threatening to your employee, and in a way that will help your employee learn what a phishing email might look like. One of the great things about phishing assessments is that it's a measurable metric. So you can repeat this, once a month, once a quarter, to see if you're making improvements in your cybersecurity awareness program. Next, sort of fundamental and basic, patching. We all know we've got a patch, but we don't. We do in the Secretary of State's office, of course. I will tell you, last weekend, I got a notification on my phone that said there's a Microsoft Exchange vulnerability being exploited in the wild, patch now. And first of all, I'm like, why do these things always happen on the weekend? But more importantly, oh my gosh, what's going on? Microsoft just had a 0-day vulnerability with their Exchange server earlier this year. So I look at the notification. Turns out it was already patched. It was patched, there was 3 patches, 1 in April, 2 in May. But apparently a lot of organizations hadn't been patching, and so it was being taken advantage of in the wild by attackers. Even more alarming, CISA just released, CISA along with FBI and a couple of other organizations released a list of top 30 vulnerabilities. These are the ones that the threat actors are taking advantage of, and they're all related to patching. So patches that had been released by companies we've heard of, like Microsoft and Citrix and F5 and Atlassian, a list of these 30 things that go back as far as 2017 that, according to CISA, they're still being taken advantage of today, and they're enough so to make the top 30 list of successful attacks. Believe it or not, there was a vulnerability on the CISA list from 2000, 21-year-old patch that was being taken advantage of enough that it was still on the list of top 30 vulnerabilities. I don't have any idea how a 21-year-old patch could not be patched, but that seems to be the case. Even just earlier this week, Patch Tuesday, which is Microsoft's monthly day where they release patches to their operating system and all their products, just in 1 month, this past Tuesday, Microsoft released 60 security patches for their products, just 60 in 1 month. So there's a need to patch, there's a reason to patch. There's no shortage of information to find out about these vulnerabilities. You can get notifications from EI-ISAC. NASS provides critical notifications. Your state IT department probably has a notification service. CIS Security has a security advisory service. CISA provides advisory. There's absolutely no shortage of information out there. Another thing that we as network defenders can do is patch management software. Patch management software is going to provide us a list of all the software and things that we need to patch on our network. And it's also going to help you push that patch out to all of your workstations and all of your servers. If you want to take this to the next level, there's threat intel that you can get from organizations like Cisco Talos or IBM X-Force. MS-ISAC is providing that intel through Deloitte for free for members of the MS-ISAC or the EI-ISAC. The last fundamental on my list today is passwords. And this is not going to be a speech about password complexity or length. Those are really important. But this is a speech about the uniqueness of passwords. Far too many of us use the same password for multiple accounts and multiple sites, and this is a very, very bad practice, and there's no reason that we should be doing this because we have password managers that can help us keep track of our passwords. Cisco Talos Security reported that in the second quarter of 2021, the leading attack vector for the threat actors is account compromise, and a large portion of account compromise is done through shared passwords. There's this notion of password spraying, and what happens is we share a password between sites, and a site gets compromised, and now your password potentially becomes known to the threat actor, and he does this thing called password spraying, and it kind of flips the paradigm of cracking someone's account, because instead of just going to a website and trying a bunch of passwords until that account gets locked out, and then you try again, that sort of thing, now they have the username, they have the password, and instead of attacking one site multiple times, they attack multiple sites one time. One failed password login attempt at one site is not going to create any attention for anybody. And so if you have a shared password, you could potentially give access to other accounts. How many people here heard about the Colonial Pipeline incident? Guess what? That whole thing was a shared password situation. Someone from Colonial Pipeline had used their corporate account to create an account at another site, and they used the same password that they have for their Colonial account. That site was compromised. The bad guys tried, so let's just try this, and it worked. And so they were able to gain access. Multi-factor authentication is not on my list of basics because I kind of focus my basics on the things that are overlooked, and I don't think MFA is overlooked, hopefully. But again, MFA would have prevented this attack, but it wasn't implemented in that situation. The last thing on my list is what we're doing in the Iowa Secretary of State's office, where we're putting our focus now, and it's on a notion called zero trust networking. Zero trust networking is probably going to be defined differently by different people. For the purposes of here today, this is the definition I'm using. The first is least privilege. This just means that as a system admin, as I'm giving account credentials to my staff and to my users, that I'm going to give them the privilege that they need and not one little bit more. Next definition of zero trust is always verify. This is the notion of saying that okay, I have this trusted user and this trusted device, but I'm going to check to make sure if this user is doing something that's unusual, or if they need to escalate to some sort of a system that requires higher privileges, I'm going to re-verify that they are who they say they are. And then the last element that sort of defines zero trust networking is assume breach. And that sounds kind of scary, but it's really, really important. A few years back, my wife and I had our house broken into, and we had a security system. Every door and window around the perimeter of our house was protected by our security system. But this particular individual decided to put his foot through our window and crawl through the shards of glass, so he did not trip the alarm. Most of you probably have a home security system, and you don't just rely on the perimeter of your house. You have motion sensors inside, and as it turned out, we had a door inside our house that was alarmed, and that's happened to be that the first door he went to, and he opened it, the alarm went off, and he left. So this is the idea of assume breach, that as a network defender, we don't just assume the perimeter of our network is the only thing we're protecting. We're protecting everything inside the network as if somebody were inside of it. I see I'm running out of time. If anybody wants to hear the rest of that break-in story, catch me in the hallway or catch me at a break. Thank you.
If we have any questions for either one of our presenters, we'll take some of those, secretaries. Except for Scott, I won't. No.
Real quick question. To me, part of the elephant in the room is solar winds. And you're talking about patching, and that's the one that sends my alarm off. Do you guys have any opinion or insight into how that may or may not have played into our space?
It's really hard to hear up here because the speakers are in front of us, but I think you asked about solar winds. And so this is really where the idea of zero trust plays a huge role, because there are situations where any sort of a zero-day vulnerability, or in this case, a supply chain attack, that they now have access. And in fact, that Microsoft used SolarWinds. And they had the idea of, actually the definition of zero trust that I gave this morning is Microsoft's definition. And assume breach is, it played an important role for Microsoft in the SolarWinds situation because of those, always verifying, always assume breach, help protect their network in that situation. From my memory, the bad guys got some source code from Microsoft, but that's about the extent of the damage. So again, there are certain, we have endpoint protection, which is based on behaviors, based on signatures. It's based on a lot of machine learning and that sort of thing. But the basics of, the other attack vectors, I get going on security, I'm sorry. Some of the attack vectors are things that are inside your network, like file sharing, or there's something called remote desk protocol that allows people to log in to another machine. And just locking those things down, locking down scripting, is all sorts of things that you can do to protect your environment.
Any other secretaries?
I would just add that, yeah, as was mentioned, that SolarWinds attack being a supply chain attack was very high order, very highly skilled adversary. I think from our model, the key there is how quick can you react once you know about it. And so having that mechanism in place to quickly inform, in our case, our statewide user base of that system, its particular, so they could quickly identify if they were affected or not, was sort of how we would bring that case home to us.
Okay, well, we're going to switch out the panel here. Go to our second part.
Well, thank you again, both to Minnesota and Iowa for presenting. I hope every state was able to take away at least one idea to bring home with you. I know we have to my state of New Mexico. Now we will shift gears to a conversation with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. We are thrilled to be joined today with CISA's newly confirmed director, Ms. Jen Easterly, as well as our longtime partner in election security, CISA's Election Security Initiative lead, Jeff Hale. Thank you both very much for meeting with us today. We will begin with remarks from Director Easterly and then move straight into the latest CISA updates from Jeff. We will reserve plenty of time for questions and discussion. Director Easterly joined CISA following a distinguished career in public service, including extensive military service in intelligence and cyber operations, and as a leader in private sector cybersecurity innovation. Thank you for being here today, Director Easterly.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thanks for the opportunity to spend time with you all today. I've been in the job for just a month, and this is my first in-person engagement, my first travel actually in quite a long time, and I'm absolutely thrilled that it coincided with this conference because I think that this partnership with all of you, there is very little that is more important to me as a citizen, as a longtime soldier, as a mom, and as somebody who cares deeply about the protection of our critical infrastructure, and in particular, our election infrastructure. A little bit more about me. As Secretary Toulouse Oliver was saying, I spent a good bit of time in the U.S. Army, went to West Point, spent 22 years in intelligence and cyber operations, did 2 tours in Iraq, a tour in Afghanistan, and then spent some time in the intelligence community. I served in the White House twice, once for President Bush, once for President Obama, and now I'm thrilled to be back here in government after 4.5 years in the private sector. I spent those years as a senior technology leader and cybersecurity leader at a global bank at Morgan Stanley. Interestingly, I went up there to build and lead what was our Cybersecurity Fusion Center, essentially to focus on understanding, detecting, and responding to cyber threats to the firm. But at the end of sort of 3 years after we built that Fusion Center, we actually expanded that model into something we called the Fusion Resilience Center, which was really a recognition that all of these threats are connected. So we were looking at cyber attacks, cyber-enabled fraud, but also terrorist attacks and geopolitical unrest and weather events, hurricanes, earthquakes, and then, of course, infectious disease and pandemics. And it was really a recognition at the end of the day, sort of goes back to what the terrific presenters just talked about, that you can try everything to prevent bad things from happening. And we all do, and we will all partner on that going forward. But sometimes it's really, really difficult to prevent bad things from happening. Sophisticated, dedicated nation-state actors, as we know, will continue to try and attack our systems and the integrity of our election infrastructure. And so one of the keys that I took away from my time in the private sector is it's all about resilience, an ability to understand the threat, to detect it as soon as possible, to put mechanisms in place so you can respond to it and recover from it to mitigate the risk. So resilience, I think, is a really, really important word for all of us, and I just want to set the stage with that. I also want to sort of pivot off something that our last speaker said about zero trust. Zero trust is a well-known, long-time way of setting up networks and architectures, and as Kyle laid out, least privilege, assume breach. But you know, as we talk about zero trust as cybersecurity practitioners, I am struck because what is so critical to our partnership is high trust. And you will hear me use the word trust many, many times over, because I think that is the foundation of our partnership and our collaboration and our relationship, as we're all focused on doing the right things for our citizens and our infrastructure. So I hope to build on the fantastic work of my very close friend and predecessor, Chris Krebs, the great work of Matt Masterson and Jeff Hale and the team to create those trusted partnerships with you. I believe strongly in trust, in transparency, in collaboration, in teamwork, and as was just said, cyber is in fact a team sport, and I also believe that life is a contact sport. And so those personal relationships, that collaboration that each of us will have together, I think is foundational to everything that we are going to do together to protect our nation. I also just want to say at the outset how appreciative I am and how thankful I am to all of you. Clearly, we've benefited as an agency from this partnership, and we've learned so much, but you all have some of the toughest jobs in government, and I have great respect and admiration for each of you. You know, dealing with issues of the pandemic, the move to remote work, the heightened environment of misinformation and disinformation, harassment and threats against election officials, and then the changes in demand for all of the services and functions that you provide your citizens. It is incredibly hard work, incredibly important work. So I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart. I am really honored to be part of this important collaborative relationship and this partnership. I know that in your capacities as Secretary of State, you deal with a lot of bad stuff. Cyber risks and threats across many sectors. And while I'm new to CISA, I am not new to this mission of dealing with some of the most difficult and complex threats to our nation. I spent a career in both cybersecurity, but as well as counterterrorism. As I said, I was deployed 3 times, and I served as the head of counterterrorism in the Obama administration as the National Security Council. Right now, the threats that we're dealing with from cyber are pretty exceptional and incredible. I've been looking at the space for a long time, and if you look at just the past 8 months, SolarWinds was mentioned, the vulnerabilities in Microsoft Exchange Server, the ransomware attacks against Colonial Pipeline, against JBS Foods, against all manner of software. The nation is facing unprecedented risk from both dedicated and sophisticated nation-state actors, but also from insiders and, of course, from cyber criminals. We all know that the threat of ransomware, it has become an absolute scourge. This is not a new threat, but what we've seen in particular over the past year where entrepreneurial cyber threat actors take advantage to many of us, almost all of us, working from home in an explosion of fraud and theft, you know, attacks against elementary schools, against hospitals, against all manner of healthcare facilities. I mean, it's really become a scourge affecting all of us across society. And so we've put a lot of work into making sure that there are the resources out there to be able to understand this problem and, more importantly, to be able to respond and recover from it. You know, these interruptions to key government functions, there can also be, I think, as everybody appreciates here, it's not just the function, it's not just the specific system, but these potential cascading downstream effects can affect so much more than just one system. It can affect many state and local government and information technology systems. And look, I think we all recognize that despite the considerable improvements that we have collectively made with our state and local and tribal territorial partners over the years, much more needs to be done to shore up our security. And, you know, from my recent review, and I've only been here a month, but I've looked at this space for a long time, there's a lot of work for us to do together to address the vulnerabilities that we have in our public-facing systems. I think, as you all know, CISA is your partner. CISA answers the national call to action. Our job is to help lead the national effort to understand, manage, and mitigate risk to our cyber and physical infrastructure. And that is not a mission we can do by ourselves, as you all know, given that much of this infrastructure is not in federal government hands. So this has to be a whole of nation, whole of society partnership to enable us to collectively drive targeted action to reduce those vulnerabilities and detect our adversaries. Now, CISA very helpfully sits in the middle of all of these communities, federal government, state and local government, with the private sector, critical infrastructure owners and operators, and we have those relationships with law enforcement, with the intelligence community, with security researchers, and yes, with those hackers that you heard about. I was supposed to be out in Vegas last week, but did a virtual keynote at Black Hat to talk about how we want to partner with these white hat hackers who do have incredible capabilities to help identify vulnerabilities on our network. So it's really all about the partnership to enable us to share insights to create a better picture of the threat environment so that we can identify malicious activity and we can respond to it and reduce those threats on our networks. You all know this. You are key partners in that cybersecurity ecosystem. You support a variety of our critical national functions. The systems that you manage are some of the most important for our citizens, whether it's incorporating businesses or obtaining a driver's license or registering motor vehicles, exercising the right to vote. Absolutely critical and crucial to everything we do on a day-to-day basis. And my commitment to all of you, humbly and sincerely, is that you can rely on CISA, as you have to date, to help protect you against the threats that imperil your ability to deliver all of these key functions and services that you have to do. As we know, there is a very diverse landscape of threats out there, and you can't be alone in this endeavor, right? There are sophisticated and dedicated nation-state adversaries, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and you cannot be expected to defend against them. So you need our help, the information that we can provide, and the services. I was really pleased to see a lot of the services that we provide listed here. We do a lot of work to make sure that all of the services that we provide at no cost, that are voluntary, that are confidential, the assessments that were talked about for phishing, for vulnerability scanning, for cyber hygiene, and then the guidance and all of the information that we put out. We work really, really hard to make sure that the information that we put out is timely, is relevant, and most importantly, is actionable. You know, I spent, as I said, 4.5 years in the private sector. If there was information coming out from the federal government that I couldn't do anything with, didn't do any good for me and my network defenders, we have to provide information that's actionable. And I would ask for your help in making sure that the products that we put out and the services are useful to all of you. So please continue to give us that feedback. You know that we put out the guidance documents, the trainings, the tabletop exercises. My very first week I got to go to Tabletop the Vote, which was super cool. And everything that we're doing to ensure that we're helping you in a pretty monumental undertaking. We also provide security clearances to you and your designees so we can share that actionable information. And I want to continue to work on that program. But I also want to really make sure that we are working to declassify as much information as possible so that it can get to the people you need to shore up that security of your networks. And so as a retired Army officer, as somebody who spent many, many years in the intelligence community, I've had some success on that, and so I'm looking forward to working with you all on that. So what's next? In collaboration with all of you, we are looking to continue to make progress in addressing cyber risk, in particular this risk from ransomware, and work to maintain the availability of all of our critical services to the American people under all conditions. And it is a very tough environment out there, as you all appreciate. CISA will continue to develop new tools and refine existing products that hopefully will make your jobs easier. But I need your help in figuring out what more you need that we're not doing. Our participation, your participation, we want to hear from you about what more you need, what we're not doing that you need to do, and how to improve all of our products and services. One of the cool things that I'm particularly psyched about that came with the defense bill in January were these cyber state coordinators for each of the 50 states. I'm told we've hired more than 30, more to come. And their role is, of course, to help, again, build those trusted relationships, provide provide your ability to understand the services that we provide, and then to work, I didn't know about that Cyber Navigator program. It's pretty cool. So to work with the other resources that you all have to make sure that you have everything you need to be able to defend in a very complex threat environment. So we remain committed to working with all of you, promoting one of the other really cool things, the .gov, the top-level domain, now free, which is great. I know we've had 300 state and local and tribal territorial governments sign up for those top-level domains. And that is really, as everybody knows, in a way to establish a web presence as an authoritative source and you know, giving confidence in the integrity of our election systems and services and infrastructure is just so absolutely important to the bedrock of our American democracy. So absolutely critical service there. Recent news out at the hacker convention last week, I announced something that I think is pretty cool. It's called the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative. This was another new authority we were given by the Congress. to do planning for cyber defense operations. So it's across the public sector, across the private sector, bring together folks to be able to create a common operating picture of the threat, to plan against it, to exercise against it, and then to implement cyber defense operations. And we just kicked this thing off. But as the initiative continues to evolve and as we prove out that model, we will ensure that we're working with all of you to scope this community's role for these efforts. So, and then additionally, we talk some about the physical threat. Please continue to leverage your protective security advisors. I had dinner with our team here, Phil Kirk, who's our regional director here, and then Chris Judge, who's the protective security advisor here in Des Moines. Please continue to leverage their expertise. They're located in your communities to provide physical assessments, guidance, and so much more. And as we know, this is a pretty serious cyber threat, but there's also physical threats that we need to put a lot of attention to. So over the upcoming years, I really look forward to building this trusted relationship with all of you, and I promise you have my commitment to work hard and continue to build and strengthen our partnership and our relationship. But as I've said throughout these remarks, I will need your help. I want to know what CISA can do to improve, what steps we can take to better support you, how we can build on the fantastic work of Chris and Matt and the team here, and what is it that you need that you're not currently getting. So please continue to use our cyber and physical resources, provide feedback on the ways that we can assist you in securing critical infrastructure. The purpose of this partnership is to build capacity to keep the machinery of democracy running in the face of current and future threats. And having spent a good portion of my life in combat, supporting and defending the Constitution with all of you, I take that very, very seriously, and I look forward to a fantastic partnership. So thank you for your warm welcome, your steadfast commitment, everything that you all do every day to safeguard our democracy and our way of life. I really look forward to getting to know all of you in the coming months and years. Again, thank you to Secretary Toulouse Oliver for your amazing leadership and support, to Secretary Pate for hosting this and your leadership of NASS, and Secretary Ardoin. I'm excited to work with you. I know you're super excited about this challenge as well, and I know we're going to be great partners and friends in this endeavor. I am going to be looking to all of you to let me know what I can do to provide you the support and the resources that you need to be successful. So with that, I want to turn it over to somebody that y'all know well, my good friend and teammate, Jeff Hale.
Thank you, Director. Thank you all. I'll begin by thanking NASS for hosting this wonderful event. Secretary Pate, thank you for the hospitality of Iowans. Thank you to Secretary Toulouse Oliver for your leadership on the Government Coordinating Council throughout the last year. Secretary Ardoin, we look forward to working with you very closely. And thanks to all of you for the public service that you provide. It truly is an honor to work on this side, trying to support you in the jobs that you do. Secretary Simon was exactly right in his remarks earlier. I like to use this slide because it shows the evolution of our conversation over the years. In 2016, we were talking about advanced persistent threat activity conducted by Russia against election infrastructure and against partisan infrastructure. Now, our risk management discussions include supply chain attacks, ransomware, discussions of mis and disinformation, the success of reporting where you all and your locals were able to surface Iranian activity and bring that to the attention of the EIISAC and bring that to the attention of the federal government, where we were able to identify that Iranian cyber actors were conducting an influence campaign in the run-up to 2020. There really was a tremendous growth across this community. And our job as CISA is to see the needs that you all raise to us and do our best to help you have the information you need to manage risks to your systems. We see ransomware as one of the primary threats going forward. I appreciated everything that Kyle Phillips described about back to basics in order to prevent the exploitation of your network, everything from network segmentation to cyber hygiene, and especially physical access. We have focused on particularly the threats of ransomware against your voter registration databases and how that can have a debilitating impact on ability to conduct elections going forward. So we look forward to working with you in providing CISA cybersecurity services on the web application scanning, on the ability to detect vulnerabilities and help you process the next steps to better secure voter registration databases. Did I get? Yeah, there we go. We have been thrilled for new secretaries to be aware of the no-cost voluntary services that we provide. They are provided through our headquarters agency, and our physical security assessments are provided by your local CISA personnel out in the field. We've highlighted our protective security advisor here in Iowa, who helped the planning and coordination of this fantastic event. We provide different tiers of services for the types of infrastructure that you provide. So many voting system vendors have a product line that they want to test. So we get the opportunity to do critical product evaluations out at Idaho National Labs, where they do open-ended vulnerability testing and help to secure the critical infrastructure that they provide, and ultimately you all are customers of, and the nation benefits from the advancements of security in those lanes. We provide you all with phishing campaign assessments or cyber hygiene services, remote penetration testing, so that you can better secure your administrative networks to the threats that you face day in and day out. Happy to go into any discussion further of that as more secretaries come on board, or your IT staffs, but we serve as a point of contact to connect you with those resources that you need. One of the pushes that we are thrilled with is a recognition of the role that our field staff have had in coordinating with you, and that serving you all as state governments is a primary mission. So we've established the statewide cyber coordinator, who is to serve as a risk advisor in addition to the existing CISA staff in the field. So you're not losing protective security advisors, you're not losing regional directors, you're not losing cybersecurity advisors. You are gaining an additional staff who sits and understands the unique dynamic that it is to be a government agency and have to support the public on your constrained budgets. Happy to work with cyber navigators and anyone across the sector to understand the unique needs of your state and locals across there. Also partner very closely with the National Guard when appropriate, and all of your partners across the community. We are prioritizing, is this following me? Yeah. Moving to the .gov top-level domain. It should be easy for the public to know when they are engaging with a government entity. So this, instead of your .com, .us, .org, this provides your organizations with the web domain that ends in .gov. That is a managed domain. Only authentic government organizations can use it. Many of you are already on a .gov, but we need your help to reach your locals. CISA has recently taken over administration of the .gov and made it available at no cost to state and local entities. We're thrilled by the uptake, but we do know that not everyone knows what CISA is, not everyone knows that this is available to them, and not everyone has the time and resources to make those changes. So we want to work with you to improve education and awareness about this available resource and reach your counties to make them aware of the value of being on a .gov and emailing from a .gov versus a personal domain. We've done, as Kyle also mentioned, where are we? The importance of physical security to cybersecurity cannot be understated. Allowing physical access to your systems, to your infrastructure, is a quick way for unauthorized actors to be able to manipulate the integrity, security, and confidentiality of your systems. We advocate for a dual path of understanding your cyber risk, but also having your physical dependencies, the physical security assessment to highlight the needs and potential vulnerabilities of your office buildings, of your voting locations, of your polling places, and really anywhere where you are trying to ensure the safety and security of your staff and the operations that you conduct. We are working, to that end, I do want to note that we are working closely with our DOJ and FBI partners. We're aware of physical threats across the community. So while we are not a law enforcement agency, I do want to know that when you raise things to us, we will do the call to one is a call to all and make sure that information provided to CISA is directed to the appropriate agency across the federal interagency. The last point I really wanted to hit on was a recent CISA product. We released a chain of custody guidance across critical infrastructure. Chain of custody is the process used to track movement and control of an asset through its life cycle. Much of your job is about speaking to the security and transparency of the elections that you run. Chain of custody is a fantastic tool for documenting those transparent processes and enabling you to provide that information back to the public. This is not bespoke or unique to elections, so this is common across critical infrastructure, whether you're doing a pacemaker or a poll book. So we want to make sure that you all have the high-level understanding and CISA Insights products that are available just outside on the best practices for securing a chain of custody and being able to speak to your constituencies about it. With that, we are happy to open up to questions.
Thank you again very much, Director Easterly and Jeff. And I just want to say that on behalf of NASS, we look forward to continuing to work with you and your team and to build upon our strong relationship with CISA. Do we have any questions from the Secretary? Secretary LaRose and then Secretary Ardwin.
Thank you so much, and Director, welcome. Looking forward to working with you, and your team has been excellent to work with. Ohio has really enjoyed the partnership with CISA, and we've been very purposeful about making sure that Ohio is taking the right steps, and that work obviously continues. One thing, though, that where I want to see more effort is on the non-government partners, right? So our vendors, campaigns and candidates. There's this mentality that is rightful that government can't really help campaigns, but this is an example where I think that there is a thing that can be done. There are a lot of things that can be done if it is equitable. I use the analogy, if the campaign headquarters catches fire, of course the fire department is going to show up. So, we can do public safety and critical infrastructure kind of work with our candidates and campaigns to help them be less vulnerable. What sort of things are you all doing in that regard, and how can we partner on that?
Yeah, I'll ask Jeff to jump in, but completely agree with the sentiment.
So all of our cybersecurity services are available to campaigns at no cost, voluntary participation. We have also engaged campaigns in a way to provide threat briefings when appropriate. Much like a lot of local election infrastructure, campaigns are extremely resource constrained, have not necessarily prioritized security over their administrative and operational functions. And so there's a lot of work to be done in improving the threat awareness and opportunity to manage vulnerabilities across their communities. Connecting with them, I know the role that you all and your clerks play in registering them presents an opportunity to provide them those educational materials that we can provide them for those security services. So we'd be happy to work with you in those capacities.
Campaigns are transient organizations. They come and go. They're stood up. They go down. And we've all seen, you walk into a campaign office and they've got their Wi-Fi password written on the dry erase board where everybody can see it, because that's the convenient thing. Those kind of practices are all too common in local campaigns in particular. So it's just a thing that I've focused on. So glad to hear you guys are as well.
The other point that seems highly relevant is the availability of voter registration data and being proffered to campaigns and how that is secured. And oftentimes, whether that is secured appropriately, people assume that it's coming from your functions that data is released in the wild, when the education that it is available to the public in many states, it's available for purchase or to campaigns through appropriate channels. I think there's opportunities to to preempt any of the false narratives that emerge from voter registration data being in the wild.
Secretary Erdman.
Thank you, Director. Appreciate your time here and your staff. Y'all have always been accessible. I guess I have a more very basic question. We as Secretaries of State, of course, are at the behest of our governors and the legislatures in terms of funding, especially for cybersecurity issues. It would be important for us if you all, in your partnership with, I guess it would be NCSL and the NGA, National Governors Association, to put forth that message in terms of it's a never-ending process for us. There's no goal line to cross. It's always being moved beyond us. And to be able to continue to secure election infrastructure and our networks, et cetera, it's important to have the resources necessary for that. And too oftentimes we're having to dig deeper into our current budgets to deal with those issues. Any attacks that we occur are what the public doesn't see is the actual prevention of all those attacks. What goes into the press is the one that's successful. What doesn't go into the press are all those that were not successful. And yet it takes a tremendous amount of resources for us to do that. And now in the current environment that we have, it's even more resources are being taken. And in terms of not just funding in terms of infrastructure needs and security needs, but also funding for the additional personnel that it takes to do so. So if that message could be broadcast with your other partnerships, that would be very helpful to us as Secretaries of State.
Yeah, of course, 100%. Completely agree with you. It resonates a lot with me in my last job because we were always asked to justify how much we were spending because we were not generating any revenue in a big bank. And so it's very hard to measure not having a major cyber attack because you've made the right investments. But completely agree. I will take that on and make sure that we are advocating for you all.
Secretary Griswold, then Secretary Warner.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Thank you for being with us. Great partners from CISA. I truly do believe that CISA saved American democracy, helped save American democracy in 2020 through all the efforts in a real bipartisan way. I guess one of the things that I wanted to bring up is touching on foreign disinformation. Last year, under my leadership, we set up a unit to combat foreign disinformation in the state of Colorado. It was 3 parts. Part 1 was monitoring foreign disinformation. Part 2 was doing outreach based on the bipartisan Senate intelligence report to communities targeted by Russia in 2016. And Part 3 was getting to Coloradans, alerting them using what we've seen come from our allies as the best way to combat it, of course, is alerting Americans to the prevalence of foreign disinformation, which is the new form of, or one of the new forms, I should say, of voter suppression. That required us spending money to get to Coloradans. People are not getting, good information necessarily at the 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. news. So that requires reaching out to people through social media, through different means. So could you tell us a little bit about how you are going to make Americans aware of the risk of foreign disinformation, and specifically how you're going to help us communicate how to get trusted information from trusted sources such as you all, us, and county administrators?
Yeah, thanks very much for that question. It's a hugely, hugely important one. I saw this as a private citizen during 2020 and thought CISA did a terrific job of grappling with these really difficult issues. And my full intent is to continue dealing with these misinformation, disinformation issues to enable the American people to get the information that they need, the facts that they need, to be able to have confidence in the integrity of our voting systems and processes and infrastructure. So I will continue on the good work that Chris Krebs did. I think with respect to getting that information out, this absolutely has to be a team sport and frankly a whole of nation effort. You all are the most trusted voices when it comes to the protection of election infrastructure. The federal government is here to provide support and resources and the information that we can pull together from our considerable sources, but ensuring that we can tap into all of you to help amplify getting the facts out and busting the myths that are out there that prevent people from having full faith and confidence in our election systems is something that we're going to have to do together in close partnership. And so I will want to work with all of you to make sure that we have those platforms in place to be able to amplify those messages again to ensure the integrity and confidence in our systems. And so really appreciative of the things that you have done, Secretary Griswold, to send that up in Colorado, and look forward to working with you.
Okay, and Secretary Warner, I think this will be our last question.
Director Easterly, you asked what you could do to help the secretaries. I'm going to couch my question in the form of a request, and that request is that you help CISA depoliticize your organization. So some of us have had a one-step forward, two-step back relationship with CISA. And the most recent one was just a week or two ago when you put out a threat warning, and it was given to the media before it was given to us as Secretaries of State. And in it, there was no specific threat analysis that there was a specific threat, but instead it was an attempt, I felt, and many others felt, was an attempt to muzzle those people going to Sioux City, South Dakota. And so that's an example of the politicization. Your most recent example here on page 2 starts talking about if you don't wear a mask, you're going to become a statistic, and on and on. There are other examples in here. I would ask you, and the previous one, the one that we all know about, is the one you've now lauded on several occasions, predecessor saying that it was the most secure election in history, and that has been used far beyond the bounds of what CISA is responsible for, and that's cybersecurity. So I'd ask you to please monitor things that come out of your organization, and in the elections arena, we have to not just be nonpartisan, but we have to avoid appearances of impropriety or partisanship, and I would ask you to take that on as a challenge as the director now, and let's end that coming out of CISA. Thank you.
To jump in to offer a counter view, I will say that my staff and myself got a week of death threats because of the Pillow Conference. So we did appreciate the DHS threat announcement, so thank you.
Okay.
Let me just jump in with one thing, and I appreciate there are a lot of different views on this, but I will tell you, I have been an independent my entire life. I've worked for Republican administrations. I've worked for Democratic administrations. I am in this business because I believe in the national security of the United States of America. It's why I deployed 3 times in combat to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. So you can count on me as your strong partner to make sure that this is a nonpartisan effort to support you. Thanks for everything you're doing.
Thank you again very much, Director Easterly and Jeff. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
At this time, I'd again want to thank everyone for joining us for this committee meeting. Before we wrap up, I would like to take a moment to thank someone who's been incredibly helpful to this committee. I'd like to ask Bo Woods, if he wouldn't mind coming up front here, put him on the spot. Come on down. Bo is a cybersecurity expert who commits a lot of his personal time to building bridges between government and officials and a cybersecurity research community. And for anyone who's been around NASS for a while, you're familiar with Bo's frequent presence at NASS events. He has devoted a great deal of his own time to learning more about the work of Secretaries of State, helping to educate the NASS community and individual secretaries on the work of ethical hackers, and helping to build relationships between those two communities. It's a great example is his work on yesterday's Hacking Demystified session. So, Bo, on behalf of all of NASS, we would like to award you with a NASS medallion, as been presented. The NASS Medallion Award allows Secretaries of State to recognize outstanding service and dedication to furthering the mission of the National Association of Secretaries of State. The award reads, presented to Bo Woods in recognition of your dedication to building bridges between government and security researchers. So please, again, join us in thanking Bo.